Since February 24th, the value of the Russian ruble has increased by 30%. Sanctions were supposed to crush the Russian economy, yet the ruble is thriving. This video is two parts. First, we'll discuss how the Russians have overcome these sanctions in the short term, but why this will not be sustainable in the long run. First, the Kremlin imposed strict foreign currency withdrawal limits to help prevent a run on the banks. They also barred banks from selling foreign currency, which stopped the selling pressure of the ruble. Next, the Russian central bank doubled the interest rate from 10 to 20% to help fend off from further depreciation. And furthermore, state-owned energy company Gazprom started demanding for payments to be made in rubles, which required potential customers to open up ruble accounts, thus increasing the demand for the ruble. On top of that, Russia had more good fortune in regards to rising oil prices. Because prices have been so high, in those first 3 months following the invasions, exports increased by 65% year over year. Meanwhile, Russia has had a 20% drop of imports due to the sanctions. This has led to a significant trade surplus. This excess cash in the economy has benefited the ruble. And while Russia has lost many of their trading partners, they've also gained some new ones. India is a prime example of this. India has increased their oil imports from Russia by over 500% since the invasion. Russia now accounts for 25% of India's oil imports. The Kremlin will now also have to rely heavily on China and look to other so-called friendly states to help pick up the slack. Initial expectations were that GDP was going to drop 12%, and that was even coming from the Kremlin. However, now it's looking like that could be closer to 3%. And when it comes to the everyday Russians, unless you worked for a Western company looking to buy a car or traveling abroad, it's likely that you haven't felt a great effect just yet. Sure, Russians may be paying some higher prices in the grocery stores, and a few items might not be on the shelves, but this is only due in part to sanctions, because this is a problem in many places around the world right now. Perhaps some Russians feel the effects of sanctions the most when they're craving a Big Mac or want the latest Apple product, or going to the shopping mall may look completely different now. However, to most, the effect of these sanctions have not been that huge. And this is geared to the people that are living in the cities. For the people that are living out in the provincial regions, that were already heavily reliant on Russian goods to begin with, the effects there are even less. If there was any country in the world that could have been prepared to handle an onslaught of the harshest sanctions ever imposed, it would be Russia. Since being hit by sanctions in 2014, Putin has been cutting dependency from the West and putting a plan in place to prepare for exactly this. Plus, the Soviet Union has 5 decades of experience of living behind the Iron Curtain, so should we really be surprised? Overall, these strategies and measures have been very effective in stabilizing the currency, and since the central bank has cut interest rates back to pre-invasion levels. In the short term, these sanctions could have pressured Putin to stop his offensive, influence the oligarchs to turn on him, or someone take him out, or cause a societal panic, crashing the economy. None of which happened. In the short term, Russia is the winner. However, that draws the question to sustainability. As we enter the more medium-term length of these sanctions, it will become tougher and tougher for the Kremlin to combat the weight of these sanctions. Let's look at the many challenges they face. Prior to the war, roughly 50% of Russian exports went to the West. That's roughly $170 billion. That's just too much revenue to lose. No matter how much you trade with China and India, you're not going to make up that deficit. And then you factor in that over 1,000 companies left Russia following these sanctions. That accounted for roughly 40% of Russian GDP. Overall, 7 of the world's 10 largest economies have sanctioned Russia. Not only are you losing the trade, but you're losing access to the capital markets. And oil prices, which have been Russia's saving grace, will not stay high forever. We're already seeing them come down a little bit. And then take the United States, who holds the largest amount of untapped oil reserves, has yet to play their hand here. Moving over to the import side, Russia imported nearly half its goods from the West, and they'll look to make up with this from internal production and substituting from elsewhere. But when it comes to technology, medicines, mechanical, chemical, and automotive products, they will be challenged to do so. This will lead to shortages across the economy of certain goods. Furthermore, the lack of mechanical parts will impact Russian factories, which will slow internal production. And these shortages will put inflationary pressures on the ruble. Inflation is already a problem in Russia at around 17%. Some of this can be attributed to the global market conditions. However, part of this is due to the sanctions and lack of Western goods. And as Russia continues experiencing difficulties replacing nearly half their goods, which is an impossible task, more inflationary pressures will start building on the ruble. And the ruble may trade for 60 US dollars today, but in all reality, you can't trade the ruble, and if you were to sell it on the black market, the price would be much different. It's only a matter of time before the Russian economy begins to collapse. High oil prices may delay the collapse, and cultivating new relations may soften the pain. Nevertheless, the weight of these sanctions is undeniable and will cripple the Russian economy, leading to many years of negative growth. If these sanctions stay in place for several years, it will be well past the point where the Kremlin can hide the effects from their citizens. After years of continued negative growth, the Russian Federation will experience a substantial decrease in the standard of living, especially in major population centers. Eventually, Russia would get to the point where they're able to grow internal production and stabilize their economy. But this would just be a new normal. The economy as a whole would be a shell of its former self. And regarding the people, the Russian media have used these sanctions to galvanize Russians, causing further rift and distrust of the West. So it's unclear when or if the people will vote out or revolt against the current regime. What is clear is that the ones who suffer will be the people. Let's hope this war ends before it gets to that point.